So the UFC is going to be hosting a tournament starting in 2 weeks time, and I'm pretty sure you genuinely may not know about it. So in this video I'm going to cover absolutely everything that you need to know about this tournament, which will be starting in 2 weeks, about how to watch it, who's going to be competing, and what is it, because Road to UFC is a tournament that the UFC is hosting for fighters in Asia to get the opportunity to win a bunch of fights and then get a UFC contract. Kind of think about it as almost like the Ultimate Fighter and Dana White's Contender Series, combined into a tournament style bracket. So this actually happened last year. Road to UFC 2022 actually took place last year. You may not have been aware of it, but the finals did take place on a fight night event. I believe it was in the UFC Apex, and then the finalists and the winners of the finalists did end up getting signed a contract. So what Road to UFC really is about is it kind of is an opportunity, in my opinion, for the UFC to break into the Asian market of MMA, to get more Asian fans excited for MMA, to get more Asian fans excited for the UFC as well. But it also acts as kind of like a good opportunity for a lot of Asian MMA fighters to get international experience where they may not have been able to get that international experience by fighting on the regional scene. And you will see that in this video. And even then, in the past as well, the one of the fighters that won Road to UFC in 2022 is from India, and he is now the only Indian fighter on the UFC's roster that is active right now. So that was a big opportunity for India to get an MMA star, and there's also a lot of opportunities for other countries that aren't that well represented in MMA to get an opportunity to send fighters to represent their country into the UFC, such as, not limited to, Thailand and also Indonesia as well. But what it is it's a tournament that takes place across 4 weight classes. You can see the brackets here for Road to UFC 2023 starting in 2 weeks, as I mentioned before. They've got a flyweight tournament bracket, they've got a bantamweight tournament bracket, and they've got a featherweight tournament bracket as well, and obviously a lightweight tournament bracket as well. And these are all of the fighters that will be competing, and I do believe that this tournament bracket is accurate, and MMA ecosystem on Instagram and Twitter is my source for confirming that this should be a pretty accurate kind of representation of what tournament's going to be. And that's because he saw at the UFC Performance Institute in Shanghai this exact bracket. But before we kind of get into the 2023 roster, I did just want to cover 2022. So the 2022 fight started last year. They were on the UFC Fight Pass this year. They will also be on UFC Fight Pass as well. And you can see kind of how the flyweight tournament went. So you had fighters from Indonesia, South Korea. You even had fighters from Thailand as well, and Japan. And it ended up getting won by different fighters from lots of different countries as well, which was very exciting. I will go over the winners of that tournament before I get into the 2023 tournament, which does start soon. The winner of the flyweight tournament in 2022 for the Road to UFC tournament was Hyun-Sung Park. He is now 8-0. He entered the tournament with a 5-0 record. He had to win 2 fights to get to the finals, and then he won the final against Seung-Guk Choi. He doesn't have a UFC debut listed yet, but he has won a contract. And it is worth noting that the contracts that these fighters win, because they have to win 3 fights to get into the UFC, they actually are pretty good contracts. I believe they're longer contracts than Dana White's Contender Series contracts, and they're also on higher pay as well. They're more money behind them. And I do believe in most instances, but not all, the finalists, if the finalist goes to the finals and then loses, they still get the contract anyway to fight in the UFC. So Rinya Nakamura won the bantamweight tournament last year. I think Rinya Nakamura is going to make waves in this bantamweight division. I think Rinya Nakamura is fantastic. I believe he's like a national wrestling champion. I believe he's also an under-21 freestyle world champion in wrestling. But aside from that, this guy's got power in the hands. He won all 3 of his fights, including the final, by first round finish. 2 of them by knockout in the very first round. And I think that he is going to be a guy to keep your eye on. So keep your eye on Rinya Nakamura. Jung Young Lee is also a very exciting fighter. He won the featherweight bracket in the last year's tournament. He did fight a very close and somewhat controversial decision to defeat Jia Yi, who was 22-3 at the time, but he did knock out his opponents. He finished 1 opponent by sub and 1 opponent by knockout to get into the final. And Anshul Jubli, the fighter from India, I believe against Joe Patrick Usami, I believe his opponent either missed weight or didn't show up to the fight, so he actually missed the first round, but he still progressed anyway. He defeated Kyung Pyo Kim in a striking battle, and then he took on Jekasara Gi and took him down and out-grappled him and won the final. So that is Anshul Jubli, India's only fighter in the UFC right now. So now that I've talked about the 2022 bracket, I'm going to talk about the 2023 bracket, and you will notice something here. It is pretty bad timing for, I think, a lot of American fans. I mean, on Saturday, the fights will be starting at 6 a.m. Eastern Time, and that is because the fights will be taking place in China. They're taking place in the UFC Performance Institute Shanghai, which is in Shanghai, China. And it's going to be pretty good. It's going to be broadcast on UFC Fight Pass. I will be live streaming fight companions for these. I will be making separate videos predicting these cards as well. And you don't just get one card per day. So starting at 6 a.m. Eastern Time on the 27th, which is a Saturday, you're going to be getting another card which starts at 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Saturday as well. But then to top that off, on Sunday, you get another card which starts at 6 a.m. Eastern Time. And then, and again, on 8 a.m. Eastern Time, you will be getting another card on top of that. So you're going to get a lot of fights. And obviously, this is the first bracket, the first rounds of the fights. So you got 4 of them, the 4 rounds of the you know what I mean. But also on top of the bracket fighters, the tournament fighters, you also actually have these fights which are called non-tournament bouts. I believe they've probably got like a more fancy name than that. But they kind of act as like a Dana White's Contender Series opportunity. So where if the fighter wins, they may get signed to the UFC. But they also act as kind of like an opportunity for fighters that haven't had the opportunity to fight high-level international competition to fight on this card and get some high-level international competition for them. So Peter Daniso is from Thailand, 5-2, and Sim Kai Jong, I believe, is from Singapore, but these fighters just haven't had the opportunity to fight internationally and fight really high-level competition, so they're on this little Dana White's Contender Series kind of fight. But now let's kind of get into the cards, because I think these are some really good fighters. I think there's some really good fighters that will come out of these cards. So the first one of the night, which will be taking place at 6 a.m. Eastern Time on Saturday, the 27th of the 5th, of 27th of May, will be this card here, the first one of the first round. You've got a mixture of all of the weight class. You've got Keisuke Sasu, who actually fought in the tournament last year and has a couple of really good wins, and he will be taking on Sang Won Kim. Now, Sang Won Kim did lose 6 months ago, but Shin Haraguchi is a fantastic fighter, and he is also in the tournament as well. I think this is a good fight, and we'll move on. Mark Klamako versus Jung Hyun Lee. In my opinion, whoever wins this fight has a very good chance that they're going to win the whole thing. These guys are really good prospects. Jung Hyun Lee, might be the best prospect to come out of South Korea. And Mark Klamako is a Filipino fighter. I believe he trains in the USA, and he's got some really good wins on his record recently as well. Jia Yi is taking on Wujiyabiki Jiahefu, and Wujiyabiki, I believe, has taken that fight on short notice, but Jia Yi was actually in the tournament last year, made it all the way to the finals. I'm not too sure if he just refused to take his contract for getting second place, or if the UFC never even offered him one, but he's back in the tournament again. Ray Suruya versus Ronald Siahan. Ray Suruya is also a fantastic prospect. I think he can go far. And then the bonus fight on this card, the bonus fight on this part of the card, is Topnoi Karam taking on Nyamjigbago Tumin Debrel. I am so sorry I did not say his name correctly whatsoever, but this is a great fight, and this should be a very fun striking affair. Nyamjago does have a little bit of grappling in the back, but Topnoi Karam is a fantastic Muay Thai striker with a personality for days. This guy is hilarious. I would love to see him in the UFC if he managed to get a win. Now we move on, so that's the first kind of bracket. We'll move on to the next kind of bracket on the same day. You've got Kai Wen Lee taking on Kai Lu, and this is a good fight. Kai Wen Lee actually did have a pretty long run in ONE FC, and I believe he was actually in talks to sign to the UFC in 2021, but then he lost to Fabricio de Andrade. He's taken a little bit of time off now. He's gotten this opportunity to get into the UFC again. And now at flyweight, we've got a fighter from India, Sumit Kumar. I believe this guy does a little bit of training in the USA against Youngak Choi, who once again made it all the way to the finals of last year's tournament. But obviously he must have turned down the contract. Maybe he didn't get offered the contract. But he is back. And then the next one is Koya Kanda taking on Yibu Zheli. Yibu Zheli is a very experienced fighter on the regional scene of China. I believe he's won these JCK tournaments multiple times. I could be wrong, but I know he is very competitive in these JCK tournaments that he does take part in. And then Koya Kanda is on a 3-fight win streak in Deep, which is a very well-respected regional MMA promotion in Japan. Jinyu Shi taking on Billy Pasilatan as well at flyweight. And then you got Taiyalaki Nuraj taking on Hyun Seol Kim at 170 pounds. And this should be a pretty fun fight. I feel like Hyun Seol Kim will almost definitely get signed if he manages to win this fight, because Hyun Seol Kim fought on a Road to UFC bonus fight last year. So I think if he wins this, he's definitely going to get signed to the UFC. But a lot of people think Nuraji might be able to get the KO. I've got to look into it, because apparently this Nuraji guy is a really powerful striker. So I'm going to have to watch some tape, and I'll give you guys my opinion on that. The next one is going to be obviously on the Sunday now. So it's Sunday, 6 a.m. Eastern Time. This bracket will take place. Zhu Rong will be taking on Xiang Hian Chon. I'm so sorry, I said his name wrong. Sung Chan Hong, and this should be a good fight. Zhu Rong, you may recognize him. He was actually in the UFC for a very short kind of period of time. He lost to Rodrigo Vargas in a fight which he kind of blew the fight. Like, I feel like potentially he just was inexperienced. He just didn't let the hands go. He easily could have won this fight if he just did more. It was a weird fight. I wouldn't really recommend you watch it back because it wasn't that fun, but it was an odd fight. And then he did beat Brandon Jenkins, but then he lost to Ignacio Bahamondes and he got cut shortly after. He's got a win against Felipe Maia since, and now he is back in the tournament trying to make his way back into the UFC at 155 pounds. I am personally very excited for this next fight. Shuya Kamikubo taking on Beijing Gialesi. Shuya Kamikubo, this guy is, I think he might win the whole thing. So much one championship experience. Look how much experience he's got under a major promotion already, against fantastic competition on top of that. I think he's going to go very far in the UFC, and probably very far in this competition as well. Then you got Kazuma Maruyama taking on Sang Uk Kim, and Long Zhao taking on Shohei Noze. And this should be a good fight too. Shohei Noze got a really good win in the tournament last year, and Long Zhao was meant to take place in the tournament last year. He was actually fought on Dana White's Contender Series in the past as well, and that should be very interesting too. And then the bonus fight for this card is Chris Hoffman taking on Sang Hoon Yu. This is going to be taking place at welterweight. Sang Hoon Yu has actually been on Dana White's Contender Series himself in the past. He lost to Peter Barrett, and now he's 2-1 since then. And Chris Hoffman, he's on a win streak. I believe he is Filipino, and I believe he was born in the Philippines as well. So I don't know if he trains in Switzerland, and that's why he's listed at Switzerland, but I don't believe. It looks like he hasn't fought in a long time. He has not fought in MMA since 2019, but he potentially has fought more recently against Min Seok Kim in 2023, but the result is unknown on Tapology. He probably won the fight, otherwise he probably wouldn't be getting this opportunity. But that is an interesting fact as well. He just has not been fighting very often recently. That should be fun. And then the next one and the final one for this kind of round of the tournament is going to be on Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. And headlining that is Won Bin Ki taking on Bahati Bolati. And that should be a fantastic fight again, because Won Bin Ki was on the tournament last year. And this guy is massive. He is so big for 155 pounds. But Bahati Bolati is also a very good fighter. He actually moved from China, to my understanding, to the USA to pursue a career in MMA to get the UFC's attention. He did lose to Haris Talanzik, who's a great fighter, in the LFA, and then he did beat Ryan Leninger in the LFA again, and now he's got his opportunity to join the UFC if he can win this tournament. Chang Hyo Lee will be taking on Rana Rudrup Pratap Singh, and that should be a good fight as well. Rana Rudrup Pratap Singh hasn't fought this level of competition before, so I'm very interested to see kind of how he's going to look facing this level of competition. Chang Hyo Lee is a pretty good fighter. He did lose to Sim Kai Jong, who actually is also on this card recently as well. This next fight as well is going to be so fun. I'm looking forward to it. Wendris Patilima is a former welterweight. He's taking on Shin Haraguchi, and Shin Haraguchi is another fighter to look out for. I believe Shin Haraguchi is another national wrestling champion. I believe he's got credentials internationally in wrestling as well. He is a fantastic fighter, but he's very small for lightweight. I don't think this guy cuts weight whatsoever, so I think if he manages to win the lightweight tournament, I wouldn't mind seeing him trying to cut weight and trying to fight at 145 pounds, because this guy is so small for lightweight. Honestly, I can definitely see Shin Haraguchi being outsized in the lightweight division if he can make it to the UFC, and he's going to have to get past Wendris Patilima, who has been fighting at welterweight recently as well. The next one is going to be at bantamweight, and that is Ipariam Ginting, and I believe he represents Indonesia. Is that flag? I'm sorry, guys. Indonesia he does, and he's taking on Darimersi Zarupasi, who is from China. That should be a good fight. Two undefeated fighters taking on each other. And then finally, in the featured fight, is going to be Sim Kai-jong taking on Peter Deniso, and that is one of those fighters where they're going to give the fighters the opportunity to fight each other, and because they haven't had international experience before. But I've got a sneaky little feeling that the winner of this fight will get signed to the UFC, because the UFC is signing a lot of flyweights at the moment, and they're signing a lot of flyweights from Kazakhstan. So I believe they are trying to sign a lot of flyweights from Asia, and Sim Kai-jong is from Singapore. I believe he's the best Singapore prospect in MMA, and he's pretty good. You know, he went 7-1 as an amateur. He's won a bunch of fights, and then Peter Deniso trains, I think he trains at Tiger Muay Thai as well with Top Noi Karam, and he's only 22 years old, and he's obviously a pretty good fighter. He did lose 2 fights to start his career, but now he's on a win streak. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you're going to be watching it. I guess the key is that these fights will be taking place on UFC Fight Pass, and they're gonna be good. Like, this is a tournament that will take place over the course of a few months, and hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully it wasn't too long. Hopefully it was informative, and you know a lot more about Road to UFC now than you did before you started watching the video. I really hope that is kind of what I'm trying to achieve here, and I'll see you guys in the next one.